turning it all over to a property manager. Does that solve your problems? Let's talk about it today in the Landlord Coach Dahlia Show.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Landlord Coach Dahlia Show. My name is Mark Dolfini, your host and Landlord Coach. It is nice to see you. I hope you had an amazing weekend. We had a fantastic weekend. The kids, my bride, and I, we went to a trampoline park and we jumped for about 5 minutes and then realized how exhausting that was and realized we need to get back to the gym. So it was a good time, but today we're going to be talking about much more important things than my exhaustion on a trampoline, but that was fun. If you haven't done it in a while, it's actually a good time for the kids. But anyway, we're going to be talking about turning it all over to a property manager, and that is something that I hear that from a lot of would-be investors where their intention is they're going to say, well, I don't manage any of my own properties. I turn it all over to a property manager, or I'm going to get to a certain point and then turn it all over to a property manager. And I'm not saying that that's a bad choice for some. Some people just don't have the personalities, they don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the tolerance for managing their own properties. I mean, some people, when it comes to dealing with other people, because again, this is a people business, they shouldn't see the light of day, right? I mean, if you're one of those people that just are not great with people, I get it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love people, but it's really hard to deal with the public. I think I know if you've worked with the public, you know what I'm talking about. It's people can be nice. The public can be awful, and there's a big difference. But I think there's a couple misconceptions here that I think that I'd like to quash before, if you're just going to say, well, I'm just going to turn it over to a property manager and I don't have to deal with it. Now, again, I'm saying this because I'm both an investor and a property manager. So I work with people on both sides. I think there's a little bit of a misconception where there's this, well, I'm just going to turn it over to a property manager and then shut off my phone and I never have to talk to anybody again. I've got somebody else to handle all the things that I don't want to handle. And I think that is a dangerous mindset because you still need to be engaged. One of the worst type of customers that I have on the property management side is somebody that is not engaged. Somebody that basically I hear from once every 4 or 5 months. They drop in and ask for the last 4 or 5 months of statements that we've been emailing them every single month. And we're like, and they say, well, we haven't received anything in 5 months. I'm positive that's not true because we've been sending them and we haven't been getting any error message. Have you checked your spam? We just generally respond back and go, well, check your spam, but we've been sending them and everything else, because we also send it to a redundant server to make sure that they actually did get sent. So we go to that server and say, oh, okay, well, they're getting emails. You know, it's not an us thing, it's them thing. You know, well, again, we do what we need to do to cover our butts. But from that side of it, this is, you know, and then they want to question a charge from 4 months ago about, you know, some repair that was done. It's like, man, that's really hard for us to manage if we're going to continually be going back. So we really want, like today, this afternoon, there were some statements that were sent out, and the owner called us within a few minutes of receiving the statement. That's wonderful. Like, we want engaged owners that are going to be actively looking at their statements. That's the best type of customer. You know, not ones that are going to micromanage us, but they had legit questions, and when they call, they're not calling for nonsense, right? So they have engaged. We have engaged owners. We have engaged investors that we work with. But the real challenge that I think, if you take that out of that side of it, so you got the mindset piece of it, where people are going to be having to stay engaged in the property, in the management of their property. So basically they're managing the managers, okay? But, you know, most people, the problem that they're going to run into is that they have not budgeted adequately for the management of the property. Meaning that if they didn't do the cash flow analysis properly when they purchased it, that they're really going to struggle to make money because they probably paid too much for the property, or their financing wasn't great, or they were expecting a higher rate of return and they didn't budget adequately enough for the management of the property, which not is just it's not just management fees. It's management fees, it's finder's fees, it's maintenance. A lot of people don't budget highly enough for maintenance. They're not budgeting for capex. They're not budgeting for vacancy expense. All the things that I talk about on the download that you can get at the landlordcoach.com/videos. You can get a free download there in terms of analyzing the cash flow of your properties properly. But that's one of the big things that we run into is people, they get really frustrated because like, man, I haven't made any money in the, since I've had this property. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. You used to, especially if they used to live in the property. Now, does it make sense for you to live in a property if you're going to be emotionally attached to it and maybe pay a little bit more for it? That's great. But from an investment perspective, it doesn't often work out. So you have to budget these things. You have to make it has to make sense on paper, and many times it doesn't. So the other reason that you have to be cautious. So again, if you haven't budgeted adequately enough, start budgeting adequately, and look at the cash flow numbers that you've got. That property may never cash flow based on the type of financing that you have, based on the amount of money you paid for it. It might be better off for a property that you sell, take that equity, and do something else with it, because it just may not be the best use as a rental property. It's one of the reasons why I talk about in the Day 245 checklist, which is 120 days prior to lease expiration, for those of you who've maybe you're just the first time watching the show, that on the Day 245 checklist, what are you doing? You're first doing a market analysis, right? So do the market analysis. And the market analysis is not just what are the rents doing, but what's the property values doing. That way you can see, well, similar properties are selling for $200,000 and my property is probably worth around that, in that same neighborhood, in that same, that's the same demographic area, same geographic area, right? And you say, well, for 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, or 4 bedrooms, 1 bath, whatever it is you have, whatever that similar property is, that you're saying, well, okay, it looks like I've got $60,000 in equity in this property. Is it still the best use given given what it is as a rental property? Does it make sense? Should I sell it? Should I leverage it? Should I get a mortgage on it? Whatever. So you're looking at it from a market analysis, property analysis, and then of course the resident analysis. But I talked about that in a previous video about the Day 245 checklist. And all that stuff I go deeper on in the Become a VIP in the Rental Business course. But the main thing on that is, you have to, the properties have to cash flow. Fundamentally, they have to cash flow, and it has to make sense. So, and some properties just flat won't, just based on where they're at and everything else. But the other thing that you also have to consider is that not all property managers are made alike. And it's like, you could go to, let's say there was a Wendy's here in town that we never went to because there was just one Wendy's that they never seem to get anything right. They have a lot of turnover and everything else. But there's another Wendy's which is really, really run well. Okay. And we used to go there all the time. We would drive out of our way to go to this other Wendy's because they always had very mindful, kids working there. They were really, really good management. It was really run very, very well. Never, hardly ever that I can actually think of did we have an issue with that. Just like every restaurant is run different because it's run by different people. The same with property managers. Just because you tried one may have been amazing and another one might be completely awful because they'd have different infrastructures, different management, different software systems. And I can tell you that many property managers do struggle. And the reason they struggle is because they have a limited infrastructure. They did not build up their infrastructure beefy enough. And what am I talking about? Well, many states have a requirement where in order to be a property manager, you have to have a broker's license, a managing broker's license, for real estate. So if that's the case, then if many of them, especially this is back in 2009, 2010, when many realtors could not sell properties, they became property managers overnight. So they started saying, hey, I can't sell the inventory that you have. Do you want me to rent it for you? Well, and as a result, property managers were springing up. I mean, they were breeding faster than Catholic rabbits. So they were multiplying very quickly, and this small industry just blew up overnight, that with people renting properties all of a sudden, and they were trying to sell properties and doing everything else. But the problem was they didn't have enough infrastructure. And it's fine if you're doing 10 or 20 and you can probably manage it on some Excel spreadsheets, and that's not a problem. but they didn't have software systems designed for property management. And there wasn't as many choices as there are today of property management software systems. So now today there's tons of options from property managers to mom and pop investors and everything else for property management software. But that's just one piece of the infrastructure, right? What's another piece of the infrastructure? Well, again, if you have a phone system that looks like this, you don't get to complain when people call it all the time, whether that's 2 in the morning or whatever. So again, we're talking about phone systems, we're talking about property management software systems, we're talking about accounting systems, we're talking about a lot of different systems that need to be put in place for all this stuff to really run well. And generally, many times, the property management infrastructure that has been constructed is done on a bootstrap, and it's just not. That's why it's not done well. The biggest complaint that I get anytime a property management client wants to come to us is it's almost always it's the same thing: lack of communication. And in my opinion, I think communication falls apart for one of two reasons: lack of infrastructure or lack of process, or poor infrastructure and poor process. One of those two reasons will cause bad communication. And so the communication is really just a symptom of the disease. The disease is being bad infrastructure, bad process, or limited infrastructure, limited process. So that's it. That's where you, as an investor, turning it all over to a property manager does not necessarily solve your problem unless you're getting one that has sufficient infrastructure. So the question is, how do you find that out, right? Well, we're going to cover that in another segment in terms of what to look for in infrastructure in a property manager. Because some people, let's face it, who do watch this show, who may want to self-manage, they got 2, 3, 4, 5 properties, and they're like, man, you know what? I really don't like this side of the job, and they don't want to deal with residents anymore, and I totally get it. So tomorrow, I believe tomorrow, I think I'm gonna do this because I know we got a baseball game we got to go to. We might not be here tomorrow. The next episode, though, we're gonna be talking about what to look for, what kind of infrastructure should you be looking for in a property manager if you're gonna hire one, and it's not all that difficult to find. But we're going to cover that in another episode. So that is all I have for today. I don't have any comments, so I'm just going to go ahead and wrap this up really quick. I'm going to post this in the links. If you are interested, Joe, you can join me in Atlanta on April 30th, May 1st, and 2nd. We are going to be there live. We've got 3 separate 2-hour segments that we're going to be teaching everything that you're going to get a copy of the Time Wealthy Investor 2.0. We're going to be talking all about the VIP method and how you can implement that. It is a teaching event. It is not going to be a hard, selling event. It's going to be 2 hours. We're going to be doing a Q&A session. You're going to be walking out of there feeling like you've eaten at an all-you-can-eat information buffet. It's going to be a really good event. That's going to be, I know there's times left on April 30th and May 1st. I know May 2nd is already closed out. So that's where we're at. Again, if you'd like to head over to landlordcoach.com/videos, you can check on, again, if you'd like just to get a copy of the book, you can get it for free. Just pay for shipping. And then, of course, you can get the download for that, for the cash flow analysis for free as well. That's all I have. So go ahead and please be sure to place a value on your free time, because if you don't, someone else will. But most important, there is no amount of money that will make time irrelevant. Have an awesome day, and I will see you guys next time.